Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a few days since I've done a video and I apologize for that, but I do have a somewhat busy schedule. So today I thought I would do a video on film, which a lot of you seem to really enjoy. And when I do film videos, which I enjoy doing very much, I get to use some of my more vintage decks because I try to pick a deck that could be associated in some way to the film, some aspect of the film. Last time when I did the birds, I used a raven deck. Today I'm doing a movie video on Ninotchka. Some of you who are into 30s films will realize that it's one of Greta Garbo's very last films, and aside from her silent films, where I think she was really exceptional, I personally don't think she was utilized as well with the talkies. But in Ninotchka, I think she's just perfect. And it's a Russian film. Well, no, it's not a Russian film. It's a American film with a Russian theme. And so for this purpose, I am using the Golden Tarot of the Tsar, put out by Scarabeo. Let me check the date. I see that the date of my particular deck is 2003, and it was published by Scarabeo. And I think you'll agree that it's appropriate to this video. Now, Ninotchka came out in 1939. It was an MGM film, directed and produced, I believe, by Ernst Lubitsch. Now, some of you may have heard of the expression, the Lubitsch touch, because it seems as though his movies had a certain magic to them, much like when Billy Wilder did a film, or Capra, or, certain directors, have a certain type of film that is just enchanting, and this film is enchanting. Of course, as I mentioned, it starred Greta Garbo in her second to last film. She had one more film after this, coupled with the same actor that she's coupled with in this film, but it was kind of a box office flop, and after that film came out, she dropped out of doing films. This film, as I mentioned, stars Greta Garbo along with Melvyn Douglas, and I love Melvyn Douglas. Melvyn Douglas, there was something about him I just love, and I'll watch anything he's in, even if it's considered a flop. It also starred, she had a smaller role, but she did some really, I think, in one sequence of this film, Ina Claire had, I think, some of the best acting in the film. She just did a magnificent job in the, and I'll get to that, I'll mention it when I get to that part. If you don't want to have the film be spoiled for you, if you haven't seen Ninotchka, then I would suggest you pause this, go watch Ninotchka, and come back, because this video that I'm creating will spoil the film plots for you, because I go over, when I do my film videos, I go over plot points, and I'm pretty thorough about it. Now, Ninotchka is a political satire, and as I did mention Billy Wilder, this was early in his career, and he wasn't a director at that time, but he was responsible, I believe, in part with two other writers for the screenplay. So there's a little bit of a Billy Wilder touch to it as well. The story takes place in Paris, and it takes place between 1917, 1918, when with the collapse of the Tsarist rule, but before World War II. It also has a couple of character actors who you will notice and spot. Bela Lugosi, who isn't necessarily a character actor, but in this role he is. He's just like a secondary a tertiary role. And Felix Bressart, who you may remember from, I think, Little Shop Around the Corner. I don't remember the year that came out, but I love him too. Anything he's in is special. Now, I think when they promoted this film, when they had in the movie theaters, and they were saying Ninotchka is the next film to see here, I think they advertised it as Garbo Laughs. It's the first film in which she ever laughed. So it has that distinction. Now, why do I love this film so much? It's just enchanting. I love Melvyn Douglas. He's so lovable, I think. And Garbo, was considered a huge actress in her day. She was winding down her career, as I mentioned, and the next film she did was her last film. So if this had been her last film, she would have gone out on a high note. But the last film she did was a dud, and I guess she was disillusioned or disenchanted, and she just dropped out of making movies. Now, the opening scene has a printed foreword that explains to us that in the days that this film took place, when they talk about things like blackouts or whatever, it's not because there's a war, but because you turn the lights out for romance, that kind of thing. The opening scene has 3 foreigners who were Russian, who are entering and exiting a fine hotel in Paris. Now, it's not a grand hotel. It doesn't have the name The Grand Hotel, but it was a hotel called the Hotel Clarence. But it was apparently the fanciest hotel in Paris, according to this film. Now, these 3 Russian, they're like emissaries, right, representing Russia. And they're going in and out of the revolving door, discussing amongst themselves whether or not they should really stay at this very fine hotel, because it goes against the ideals of their countrymen, right? They should be satisfied with a simple hotel. But this hotel in Paris is just exceptional, and it's beautiful, and they know that they probably will never have another chance to stay at such a fine hotel again. So they're trying to justify in their own minds how they can explain to the powers that be in Russia why they should choose this wonderful hotel rather than a cheaper, less expensive hotel. And they decide, because they came to sell the crown jewels of a Grand Duchess, who of course was thrown out of Russia, right? When the Bolsheviks took down the Tsar and all the nobility, the Grand Duchess, her name was Grand Duchess Swana, a fictional character, her jewels were confiscated by the Russian government. So all her jewels were confiscated, and she was exiled. And so these 3 emissaries, or 3 agents, Russian agents, whatever they're called, had the task of going to Paris in order to sell these jewels, because Russia was not doing very well. Everybody was starving, and these jewels were considered to be an excess, that nobody should have such jewels. And so they decided to sell them, pawn them off, and then that's what they were tasked to do, and to return to Russia with the money. So they justify that they're staying at this grand hotel, because and not only just the Grand Hotel, but the most deluxe suite in the whole hotel, because that suite has a safety vault that can contain all these things. So that's how they justify it. So they settle on the best room, the best suite with many, many, many rooms in this hotel, so that they can justify that they're staying there in order to keep the jewels safe. Excuse me, I have to read my notes. I don't want to miss anything. So the Countess, her name was Countess Swana, escaped Russia, fled to Paris, where many other displaced Russians fled. And of course, they were, Paris at this period of time, as many times since, is just the city of lights. It's a magical place. And coming from the austerity of Russia must have been really magical. Now, another displaced Russian was also in this hotel as a worker. He was a butler. I forget what his name was in the film, but he has a small role. Now, he happens to be the butler assigned to these three emissaries when they arrive, and he recognizes the jewels because he hears them talking that they have the jewels and they have to sell it to a jeweler to get money. So he, of course, aligns himself with the nobility because he was a Russian who was sympathetic towards the nobility. I don't think he had a title himself, but he was of the upper classes. But now he's working as a butler in a hotel in Paris. So he notifies the Countess that he sees her jewels that had been confiscated, they say illegally by the Russian government. He sees that these three emissaries have her jewels. So he goes to her and he says, "Countess, your jewels are here." So of course she gets very excited and she wants her jewels back. So she immediately, calls her lawyer rather, and which I think this phone sequence where she's calling and talking to her lawyer is exceptional acting. Now, what do I know about acting? Take what I say with a grain of salt. But the few minutes that she's on the phone, I think is just a brilliant. But anyway, she calls her attorney and she says, "My jewels are here. Some emissaries are trying to sell it. Arrest them immediately and get me my jewels." And the attorney says to her, you don't hear him talk, but you can surmise from the conversation that he tells her, "You really don't have much chance. Paris recognizes the new government. They're not going to get into a war with Russia over your jewels. So you probably will never get your jewels back. You just have to suck it up, But she's not happy about that. But her boyfriend, her gigolo boyfriend, who happens to be nobility himself. So this is kind of strange. It's a strange thing about him. He's got a title, but he's also a gigolo. But he's not Russian. He himself, I think, is Parisian. Her boyfriend, this gigolo, played by Melvyn Douglas, his name is Leon, happens to be in the room, and he hears that her jewels are there, and he knows that the government, or her attorney says, "You don't have a chance in hell." So he says, I will represent you. Don't worry about paying an attorney. I'll take care of it. I'll deal with these emissaries and I'll get those jewels, because he's very charming. He could talk the pants off a snake, and he takes on this role of working on her behalf to get her jewels. So what he does is that he Leon barges in while the emissaries are trying to sell the jewels to Mercier, I think it was, and he sabotages the transaction. They were just about to sell these jewels, and he sabotages the transaction. And the jeweler says, "Well, if there's an injunction, we have to wait until it's satisfied." So really, they knew that Leon knew that there would be no chance that the Duchess would get the jewels, but he figured he could hold it up in court for a really long time and make it really hard for the Russians. So that's what he does. But of course, the three Russians are kind of scoundrels, because they are thrilled that it's being postponed and it's being prolonged, because they fall in love with Paris. And so they're fine with Leon putting a jinx in the works, because the longer it takes to sell these jewels or to unload these jewels, the longer they get to enjoy gay Paris and the charms of, Western society. So after the Russian government feels as though they've been taking way too long to finish out this task. They send another diplomat, emissary, to Paris to find out what's going on with these three guys and to wrap it up, So she goes to Paris to assist, and of course that's the fabulous Greta Garbo. Now she's very rigid and very kind of a person, and she's not at all fashionable because they make her come over, looking like whatever the word is for a comrade, right? She's like no frills, no fanciness, nothing about her. She'd wear a potato sack if she could. That's that kind of a person. Nothing fancy about her at all. So she goes and she sees these three guys and she realizes that they're scoundrels. And they introduce her to Leon, who is their representative. Well, actually, when she arrives, she actually meets Leon quite by accident, quite by chance on the street. And they strike up a conversation. And he's smitten by her for reasons I'll never know, because she's not like glamorous. It's not like she's the Garbo from silent film era. She's like very like unattractive, I thought. But they strike up a conversation and he's just fascinated by her. And so he starts kind of stalking her, which is not a good thing. I'm not condoning stalking, but he's fascinated by her. And so he tries to deliberately meet her by accident any opportunity that he has. So they, unbeknownst to each other, he doesn't know that she's the emissary or the diplomat sent to Paris to investigate what's going on, and she doesn't know that he is involved with the Grand Duchess. So they just start to have a little love interest between themselves. He takes her to his apartment, and you learn a little bit about her past. And she must be attracted to him because she has no problem going to his place and, sharing an intimate moment. But the phone rings while they're, involved. And from the conversation on his end, she recognizes that he is the lawyer sent to represent the Grand Duchess. And so she figures it out. And she's like, oh, I can't have a relationship with this guy because he's the enemy. So she gets up to leave, and then, he realizes who she is. And he begs her, like, come on, there's nothing more sweet than sharing a secret with the enemy. Let's have our thing this evening and we'll deal with it tomorrow, whatever political baloney, And she's like, no, it's not appropriate. So she leaves. That's the end of their little tryst, except for the fact, like as I mentioned, he starts to try to find her wherever she'll be because he's charmed by her for some reason, which will be one of the questions that I'm going to be asking the cards because I don't get it exactly. So he wears her down and she eventually falls in love with him. And so then she becomes just like the other three emissaries, where she's not in any hurry to sell these jewels because the longer it's postponed, the longer she gets to be with Leon. Now, Leon, in all fairness to him, he's trying to postpone the inevitable in the beginning just because he wanted to satisfy the Grand Duchess's he wanted to make her happy, and he wanted to keep the jewels, and he wanted to give the Grand Duchess the best fight they had for getting the jewels back to her. But as he falls in love with Ninotchka, those are no longer his reasons. The reasons he wants to postpone the inevitable is because the longer he postpones the transaction, the longer he and Ninotchka have together in Paris. And you know that Ninotchka starts to enjoy the Parisian lifestyle because she starts buying silly hats, that she looked at originally when she came into the city, and she saw a ridiculous looking hat. And she's like, who on earth would wear such a ridiculous hat? But the longer she's there, she becomes enchanted by ridiculous hats. And so she buys herself a ridiculous hat, and she buys a most elegant evening gown. And so she herself now is beginning to just love Paris, and she loves Leon. In the meanwhile, Grand Duchess Swanna begins to realize that she's losing Leon to Ninotchka. So she begins to smell the rat, and she knows that Leon is falling in love with Ninotchka. And I don't know if she's in love with Leon, but he's her boy toy, and she doesn't want to lose Leon. So she conspires with the butler, who I mentioned in the very beginning of the video, and he sees that there's a weak moment where Ninotchka and Leon are in the suite, and they're both a little on the tipsy side, and they put the crown, the tiara on Ninotchka's head. So the jewels are not protected. They're not in the safe. And so Leon leaves that evening with Ninotchka in bed with the tiara on her head. And the butler takes advantage of that moment, and because they left carelessly, not only did they leave the tiara on her head, but they left the door to the safe open. So the butler comes in and confiscates and steals all of the jewels and gives them to Swanna. So Swanna comes to Ninotchka the next morning and says, you can have all these jewels, but you have to and you can take them back to Russia, and you can have the jewels, and you can say that you just weren't able to sell them, and you'll have all the jewels. You won't be in any kind of trouble with the Russian government. But you got to be on a plane tonight, because she wants Leon for herself. So she's like, I'll give you all the jewels, but you have to disappear, and you can't tell Leon what's going on. You just have to leave. So Ninotchka, feeling obliged to be loyal to her country, she accepts the deal, and she takes the jewels, and she and the 3 emissaries return to Russia. Now, when they return to Russia, you see the lifestyle, that they live in Russia in contrast to the lifestyle they lived while they were in Paris. And now it's a little bit of a plot hole, because if she was a diplomat, or, if she was a high-ranking government official, she would have been one of the few people in Russia who were living large, But for the film to show us how generally the Russian people lived, they had her living in a, very unsatisfying way, where she shared a room with, 4 or 5 different strangers, and people from down the hall would come through her apartment without even knocking on the door to go to the toilet, that kind of thing. And when she has, there's a scene where she and her friends, these 3 men get together to share memories of gay Paris, and they're singing and they're having a good time. They have to share, there's 4 of them, they have to share an omelet made with 3 eggs, and they're happy for it, because it's like a grand meal, So the contrast of 4 people sharing a 3-egg omelet is quite different from what they were accustomed to, in wonderful French cuisine. Now, unbeknownst to Ninotchka, Leon, who was, of course, left in Paris without any explanation about what happened, he went to Swanna and said, I've fallen in love, and I want to be honest with you, because I've fallen in love with this other woman. And then Swanna tells him what happened. So he wants Ninotchka back. So he keeps going to, who was ever responsible for getting visas to go into Russia. And he keeps trying to get into Russia so he can see her. And he has many failed attempts. And the reason they won't give him a visa to go into Russia is because he has a title himself. He's a French count, you know. So they won't allow him to go into Russia because they see him as part of the problem. He's nobility. And he's like, look, it's not political. I have no interest in doing anything with your government. I just want, I just want to be with the woman I love. But they keep stamping denial, and he can't get into Russia to save his life. But she doesn't know, and Ninotchka doesn't know any of this is happening. So she has no idea that he's trying to get in. And she knew his address, so she wrote to him eventually. But, all her letters apparently must have been censored to him. And all the letters he wrote her have been censored to her. Everything's crossed out. The only thing they see for each other is my darling Leon or my darling Ninotchka. And then however they signed it, yours, Ninotchka, or yours, Leon. So they never even can see the content of one another's letters. But she still is in love with Leon. And apparently he's in love with her because he keeps trying to get into Russia. He also, it's not really that he's trying to get her to just love Paris, and to give up her ways, because there are a few scenes where he reads up on the Russian way and he tries to live it a little bit, but ultimately, he's a Parisian. So the next thing is these three are sent to Constantinople, which I don't know anything about Constantinople in this period of time, but it must have been special. There must have been a certain magical charm about Constantinople during this period of time. So they were sent to Constantinople, I think, to sell furs, again, to get rid of some of their magnificent furs in order to bring back money for the people. But again, they get enchanted by the Constantinople way. And once again, they prolong the process of doing what they got to do to get the money back to Russia. And Bela Lugosi, who is a government official, contacts, demands Ninotchka to go into his office, and he says to her, your three friends are now doing the same kind of shenanigans over in Russia, in Constantinople. So I'm sending you to straighten it out like you did the last time and to bring them back, because apparently they're taking too much time to do this. So she doesn't want to go back because she's had a taste of the good life in Paris, and I guess she considers herself a good Russian. But at the same time, she's only human, and she doesn't want to be tempted, because if it wasn't for the fact that she would have been in a lot of trouble with Russia had she not returned with those jewels, she probably would have stayed, But Bela Lugosi insists that she go. So, being a good Russian, Ninotchka goes to Constantinople to confront these fellas and say, you gotta straighten this out. I can't keep getting you out of trouble, and you're in deep trouble. You don't understand how much trouble you're in. I mean, you're in Siberia kind of trouble. And they're like, oh, Ninotchka, get over yourself, We're never going back. They defect, We're never going back. We've opened a restaurant, we have, it's totally staying here, So, and she's like, oh my gosh, how could you do this? What's behind all of this? And of course, Leon is behind all of this. So Leon steps out from where he was hiding behind a balcony. Well, he was on the balcony or something like that. So you see that, and to some degree, I'm not sure exactly how he did it, but Leon arranged for those three to get out of Russia, I think, or at least when they were sent out of Russia to sell the furs, he found out about them. So he followed them wherever they were, and was utilizing them and understanding how enchanted they were by Western culture. So he took advantage of that as well as he could, because he knew if he got them to behave in the way they were, that eventually the officials would send Ninotchka back to get them. So he was counting on Ninotchka coming back to take them back. So she sees that it's Leon, who's behind all of this. And she's like, I should have known you were behind all of this. Oh my gosh, and they embrace and they're in love. And she's like, I can't stay. I've got to go back, And he's like, why? Why do you have to go back? Because I'm never going to stop pursuing you, and I'm never going to stop corrupting any emissary they send. Any emissary they send, I'm going to corrupt. So eventually what's going to happen is that they're going to run out of Russians, because they're all going to defect. And if you really want to be a good Russian, you'll stay here with me and not return to Russia, because I will just ruin, I'll corrupt all the Russians who come out here. So if you really want to save Russia, you'll stay, and therefore minimize how many people are corrupted to the Western ways. So it ends that way. That she says, oh, well, nobody can accuse me of not being a good Russian. And so she succumbs to Leon's charms, and so she stays in Constantinople. So it is a love story, about people from different worlds, and how different they are. And it's also a bit of a political satire about capitalist life versus communism. And as I mentioned, in all fairness to Leon, he's not just trying to get her to be his way, because he would have been equally as happy to go to communist Russia to be with her. Now, they would have been really the Soviet Union, but when there's any reference to Russia, it's always Russia, or sometimes they'll call it Soviet Russia. So, some people criticize it because, well, he's trying to make her change her ways, but it's like he was willing to change too, but he just couldn't get in. So the only way that he could be with her is to get her out. And as a funny anecdote at the end, to show the difference, between like capitalism and communism, the three restaurateurs, the three emissaries who open up a restaurant with one another, have a fallout with one another, and one of them is like on the outs, and so two of them kick the third one out of the restaurant. So he's in front with a sign protesting their restaurant because they're unfair to him. So it's kind of a cute little ending. But at any rate, my questions for the cards are: why is Leon attracted to Ninotchka in the first place? Because she's very rude. She's very austere. There's nothing attractive about her. They make her almost look like not a glamorous woman at all. She eventually becomes a glamorous woman, but in the beginning, when he falls for her, she's not at all glamorous. So I want to know what it is about her that charms him to make him want to pursue her in the first place. And I only have one other question. Why did two of the three Russian emissaries fall out with the third guy? Like, why? Their names were Kopolsky, Ivanov, and Bulzhanov, right? So my question is, what happened between those three to make two of them kick him out of their restaurant business? So those are my two questions. Before I do the answers, though, I do want to mention, before I forget, that there were several films after this film which were either slightly based on Ninotchka or heavily borrowed from Ninotchka. One was the 55 musical Silk Stockings, and there was another film in 1957 starring Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse. I forget what that one was called. And there were two more other films. One was called Comrade X, and the other was called The Iron Petticoat. All four of these films were based on Ninotchka. And behind-the-scenes trivia. Ina Claire, the Grand Duchess Swana, the one who's acting on the telephone, I said was exceptional. She was once married to John Gilbert, who had an affair with Garbo. In fact, Garbo left him at the altar. Okay, so I'll switch to the camera and we'll lay a few cards to answer two questions. All right, so question one is, why on earth was Leon attracted to Ninotchka in the first place at all, considering that there was nothing glamorous or beautiful or even pleasant about her? This will be a hard one to answer. This one will be a tough one to answer. Remember, I don't read reversals. Okay, so we have Judgment. Now, what I want to point out about this deck is that we have this gold. So it's a flashy deck. Now, remember, with Lo Scarabeo, they have a tendency to put the names in like 5 or 6 different languages. So there's that. But I just want to give the opportunity to show. I want to take the opportunity to show the card. And, you know, another reason why I like doing these videos, these movie videos, is because it allows me to have a reason to showcase some of these decks that I would really not normally show. Okay, 6, the Lovers. Okay, I guess the heart wants what the heart wants. Is this a, let me see. Is that the Lover card or is this something different? Yeah, the Lovers card. So he just falls in love with her. The heart wants what the heart wants, I guess. And then this is the Queen of Swords. So he just, you know, there's no rhyme or reason. He just falls in love. For giggles, let's see what the numbers would be. So we have 26 minus 20, and we don't count this because it's a court card, right? So we have 26 minus 22 would be 4, which is the Emperor. And here is the Emperor card. So, you know, he knows what he wants. He knows what he's attracted to. And, you know, he just fell in love with this austere woman. The heart wants what the heart wants. And he just fell in love with her. And it's not for us to understand, because how many times in life do we fall in love with people that nobody else sees what we're seeing in this person, right? He saw something about her. He knows who he is. He knows what he wants, and he got it. Okay, the second question is, what happened between the 3 emissaries to make 2 of them lose favor with the 3rd? Let me shuffle the cards and we'll lay 3 more cards. So we have 7 cups. Oh, they have so many options, right? They, you know, maybe they have so many options in this new life they've got for themselves. And maybe, you know, because life isn't so cut and dry where it's got to be one way or the highway, they didn't see things the same way. About what? Let's see. So this is the Queen of Coins. So perhaps they didn't see the same way about money, spending money. And then we have Justice. Let's see what the Quint card would be. We don't count the Court card, but we have in this deck, Justice is 8, so it's not 11. So we have, which is interesting, isn't it? You know, usually they put, when it's a Rider-Waite-Smith-based deck, 8 will be fortitude or strength, right? But that's not the case here, which is kind of interesting. So we have 8 and we have 7. So that is, wow, that's very interesting. That's 15. That's the devil. Oh my goodness. Capitalism. So isn't that interesting? Maybe it's a statement about capitalistic greed. You know, maybe he got too greedy for them or they got too greedy for him. Certainly it was about money. Now, I know that this is a woman, but it could represent the concept of, you know, power, money, you know, being in power with money. So they had too many options, or they had an emotional disagreement on how money should be spent. So they got into a conflict regarding that. And, you know, this card suggests that it was a little bit about greed. So I think that's kind of interesting. Let me flip the camera. I do want to mention that Melvyn Douglas has a granddaughter who is herself I believe she's a director. And some of you may remember her. She had a small role in the film called Stir of Echoes, which I think came out exactly around the same period of time when the one about dead people, I See Dead People. What was the name of that movie? It was a M. Night Shyamalan movie. What was the name of that movie? Well, if you can forgive me, it was a huge success, and you know what movie I'm talking about. I just can't think of the name of it. But if you see that film, and you'll know exactly who the relative is, because who the actress is that is Melvyn's granddaughter, because she looks a lot like him. And I love Melvyn Douglas. Oh my goodness, I just love him so much. And I just want to mention that I'll be doing a few other videos, probably in this outfit, because as soon as I finish this, I'll be doing at least 2 other videos, because I have to release my videos. Sometimes I have to do a few videos in one sitting in order to be able to put out some videos. And I had Easter here. I had everybody here for Easter. Then I had I babysit my grandbaby 3 days a week. And then tomorrow, after I finish babysitting one of the babies, the other one, his older sister, is going to spend the weekend with me. So he'll go home and she'll come here, and I'm going to, when I'm devoted to my grandbabies, I don't do anything else. So I want to make sure that I have a few other videos lined up. So there may be another movie video, that I do. I think there's a possibility that I'll be doing, I have a few, so I don't want to mention any of them, but I have a couple videos that I want to do on film. And then I do want to do one of the next videos I do will be on the young man who disappeared in Tennessee, Sebastian Rogers. That one's gotten under my skin. I kind of feel like I want to do a video on that one. So if you see me in the same outfit with the same jewelry on, don't think I'm a nasty girl who wears my clothes several days in a row. It's just because I'm knocking out a few videos, and I don't see the point in changing my clothes. Any of you who do YouTube videos understands, how that is. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.